A big hi to all the students. Welcome to another session of botany. In this session, we are going to discuss ecosystem under the unit Ecology and Environment. We have already discussed another chapter of this unit, that was Organisms and Population. And this is the second chapter of this unit. So many of the topics that we started in Organisms and Populations, you are going to find in this chapter also in continuation. In the earlier chapter, that is Organisms and Populations, we had discussed meaning of ecology, environment, habitat and niche, ecological levels of organization, that is from organism to biosphere, characteristics of a species, population, biotic community, ecosystem, succession, climax, biotic and abiotic components of ecosystem, ecological pyramids, food chain, and major types of ecosystem. Therefore, we are going to discuss only the remaining topics in this chapter, which will include food web, energy flow in an ecosystem, agroecosystem, and ecological adaptations in plants and animals of aquatic and desert habitat, which will include the structural as well as the physiological features. So let us begin with our first topic, that is food web. Now, before we begin with the topic food web, we must have a very clear idea of food chains. We have discussed this topic, that is food chains, in our last chapter, that is Organisms and Population, under the same section, that is Ecology and Environment. I suggest that if you have any difficulty in recalling about food chains, please refer to that section before proceeding with food web. So coming back to food web, this concept was first introduced by a scientist named Charles Elton. We can define food web as a graphical representation of the feeding relationships that exist between the various species in an ecological community. The food web depicts the flow of organic matter and therefore also the flow of energy among the various species of the community as a result of the feeding relationships that exist between those species. All the species which occupy the same positions in the food chains in a food web constitute a trophic level. For example, all the plants in the food chains in the food web will constitute the first trophic level of autotrophs, which are also known as producers. All the herbivores which directly feed on the producers, that is the green plants mostly, in the food web will constitute the second trophic level of primary consumers, and so on. Since the concept of food web may appear very similar to that of the food chain to you, let us first clearly summarize the difference between the two. Unlike food chains, which follow a very linear path of transfer of organic material or energy, food webs depict a complex network of relationships among the various species of a community and illustrate all the possible pathways. Therefore, a food web may consist of many food chains. So now let us discuss an example of a food web which will clarify it further to us. The study of the food web will give us an idea of the various patterns in the interactions of different species, the strength of those interactions, the variations in those interactions, and also the effect of various factors on them. So here we are going to discuss a food web found in Antarctica region. The producers in this region that produce organic foods are phytoplanktons. These are microscopic plants and are the primary producers in this food web. They have been not shown in this diagram. Then krill, which feed on the phytoplanktons, are therefore the primary consumers in this food web because they are feeding on the producers. Small fish and such as ice and toothfish and squid, these are the secondary consumers since they are feeding on the primary consumer, that is krill. Emperor penguin, crab-eater seal, Adelie penguin, petrel and humpback whale are the tertiary consumers in this food web. Let us see how. Adelie penguin and emperor penguin feed on krill and small fish. Since they are feeding on primary and secondary consumers, these are the tertiary consumers. Then we have the crab-eater seal. They are carnivorous and dive deep for prey. They feed on squid and fish, which are secondary consumers in this feed web. Similarly, we have humpback whale, which feeds on other fish like ice and toothfish and krill. Since it feeds on primary and secondary consumers, it is also a tertiary consumer. Petrels are also carnivorous and they feed on small prey. Then the next trophic level is the top level carnivore. They are the killer whale and leopard seals, which are at the top of this food web. Killer whale feed on fish, squids, sharks, birds, seals and even other smaller whales, whereas leopard seals feed on other seals and fish. So as we can see in this food web that there are various cross-links among the various species. It is not linear in nature, and then we can also differentiate many food chains in the single food web. Now let's see in how many different ways can we graphically denote a food web. There are basically three ways. The first type of representation of food webs is known as the topological webs. These are the descriptive and non-quantitative representation of nodes, that is the organisms, and the links, that is the relationships that exist between them. The second type are the flow webs. They are also based on the topological webs, but they have additional information about the flow of carbon and nutrients from one node to another, that is from one organism to another. The third type are the interaction webs, which show the influence of nodes of one level, that is organisms of one level, on the nodes of the other level, or we can say on the organisms of the other level. Now let's proceed to our next topic, that is the flow of energy in an ecosystem.